Hi, and welcome to the TufFish Show. I'm your host, Jen Milius, and I'm so glad you're here. And today we're going to celebrate the 100th episode of the show. I know, right? I'm so excited that we are at 100 episodes. So thank you to the amazing guests so far who have been on this show. And thank you to you, the listeners. I'm so glad that you are here along this journey with me. This show has just been such a joy to start, to create, to follow, and see where it goes. It's just something that just brings a lot of joy. And so I thought that the best way to celebrate 100 episodes was to talk a little bit about like the behind the scenes and some little tips and tricks kind of thing. So let's start with why I love this show. I think that that might be a nice way to kind of ground into what this show is really about, right? And first off, I just really love getting to know people, getting to know what they're about, how they came to be with the things they've created in the world like this. So to me, I just find that fascinating and love shining a warm, encouraging spotlight on someone else. When I see something good that someone has done, or that I can see that what they're doing, I think it's important to tell that person. It doesn't have to be a professional setting. It can be a personal setting. In fact, that's even more important. But when you see something that someone's done well, tell them, because quite honestly, it can be so easy to find the negative. When you can find the positive and you tell someone, you don't know what that ripple effect can be. And so this whole show is about shining that warm, positive sunshine on that guest and what they have contributed, what that writer has done, and what they're going to be doing even more so. And I love the fact that this encourages writers to actually want to share their book, because it's one thing to publish the book. And that in and of itself is a huge undertaking. That in and of itself includes so many milestones: getting that first draft done, getting those next few drafts done, making its way to actually getting formatted, making its way towards advanced readers and publication and so forth. There's so many parts in this that each one of those milestones are big and celebrating. But once that book is published, you want to keep talking about it. You want to celebrate that too. And what better way to celebrate it than to share and talk about it? And I realize sales can feel a little icky, especially to writers. But when you shift that perspective and look at it as, I'm so excited about what I've created. I created this thing. It means so much to me, and I can't wait to share it because there's joy there. I was excited about it. It doesn't feel like selling. In fact, that's not really what you're doing at all. You're just talking about something that you're excited about. And that joy is what comes through. And that is what helps with that connection that you can make with other readers, other listeners. It's the joy. So let the joy come through. And that's what this show also is about, is creating that ability to create that connection and share more of the work that we're doing. And I think it's really cool that when you can listen to someone else and for their perspective, you can see how can you take what you've learned, what they've done, what's gone on in their world, what's worked, what's not, and apply it to your own. No matter how many books you've published, you might be on your 10th book. That doesn't mean you can't learn from someone who just finished publishing their first book, and they did some things a little differently than what you've done. Maybe they had a great book launch and you learned some tips and tricks from them that made it even better for when your next book comes out. Maybe there was a book that you wanted to relaunch in some way. This gives that opportunity to hear some other tips and tricks. Or maybe you're in a writing slump and maybe it just feels like just it's just not flowing. The writing's not flowing. You feel blocked. Even with the edits and the feedback that you're getting, it's just hard to kind of take it and do something with it. This show can offer that support too, that there are others who get it. There are others who've had to work through that murky middle. There are others that have had to figure out how to get from point A to point B, no matter the genre, no matter the topic. That's the commonality. And you're not alone. That's a big part of this show, is to create the space that says there's a community here and you're not alone and you're doing some amazing work. So leverage that community and that knowledge, and that tribal knowledge in some way, because it's in their heads. And sometimes without the right question, you might not get that answer. I love how this community it's getting served by this podcast because I love this community. I love being in the writing, publishing, author space because I am a writer, first off. I'm an editor, but I love books. And I just think that that is such a powerful way. This show is a powerful way to shine a beautiful light on this creative expression that we get to have. A book is like magic. I think that was the quote that I remember reading. And I want to say it's Neil Gaiman, but I could be wrong. But I know that it can be nerve-wracking, though, to put yourself out there, to be on a show, because as a writer, a lot of times you think of it as I've worked on this book, I've written it, I've now gotten it published and it's out into the world and I'm sort of talking about it. But to actually go on a podcast or a show, be seen, be heard, that's a whole nother experience, whether it's video or just audio. That's still a different experience than writing and getting it published. Both of them, though, all of those facets, though, take courage. I don't know if you've heard this saying before, but new level, new devil. That's what I envision. That's what happens. You start out the writing process and you are embarking on something new. You're writing this book. That's a new level. So there's a lot of things that kind of nag at you and pick at you that you work through, and then that first draft is finally written and done. And then you get edits, and then you move through that again. It's another level. So each time you're advancing that manuscript to its final state to get published, those are new levels that you work through. And once that book is published, it's a whole new level too, because now it's about talking about this book. It's about sharing this book. It's about sharing your work and your message. And that takes courage. That takes courage. That takes confidence. And it takes something that you're willing to keep showing up and doing. And I get that it's nerve-wracking, but in the same breath, that's the thing that I love about this show, is that each one of these writers who have been on the show demonstrate that it is possible. And if it's possible for them, if they're making it happen, it's possible for you. And that is so cool because, again, you don't feel alone because you see someone else who's doing it. And why not you? Why not you? You already did an amazing thing by getting a book published. So why not you to take it to the next level and talk about it? And even if you haven't had that book published yet, you're showing up, you're doing the work, you're honing your skills, whether it's in the craft of writing or it's working through the different phases of publishing or figuring out, okay, I know what I will need to do when it is published. What else do I need to do to help myself be ready so that when it's published, I'm excited to talk about it and I'm getting ready to work on the next piece. Some behind the scenes I thought I would share in this episode is that I don't send preset questions to my guests. I tried that a couple of times and it just didn't feel right to me. It felt too constrictive. It didn't feel expansive. What feels expansive to me is to be able to lead with a similar question, which is typically, how'd you get into writing? Because I genuinely love hearing that story. And then I close typically with, how'd you get into, how can people connect with you? How can they get your books? But in between, it's just me actively being present, actively showing up to that conversation and listening and being a part of it and asking questions that I genuinely want to know. I'm showing up as though I haven't hit the record button and that we're not sitting in Zoom, but rather actually sitting at a coffee shop with a couple of teas or coffees or whatever and having this conversation in real life. So to me, it's just a natural extension of what I would do normally. Before each interview, I take a few minutes and just say a little prayer, say a little gratitude, because I just want to bring my best self into that interview, into that space. Because I feel like when I'm doing that, then that makes it not just easier on the guest, and my guest feels lighter, maybe a little bit more relaxed if they were a bit nervous, but they know that they are really wanted there, that they know that the person who is meeting them on the other side really wants to get to know them and they're happy that they're there. It's an audience that's saying, I'm excited to have you. Let's have this great conversation. So I think that that's really important. And that's something that I do to further help that space so that we can have the great interview. And when there's a great interview, then that means it's a great experience for that listener as well. One of my favorite things to do, one of my favorite things, actually, not necessarily to do, I take that back, but one of my favorites within the show, though, is when I get a podcast pitch from a potential guest and I can tell that they really get it. Like I can tell that they've listened or they've watched. I can tell what's clicking with them. And I can really, truly see why they feel this show is the right fit for them. That tells me that they've done their homework, but that also tells me that they really believe that they will do a great service for my listeners and that they will be excited about being there. That matters to me. And I'm glad when I see that, when that happens, it puts a big smile on my face. And I'm really excited to have that person in the space with me. And that interview, every single time, it's amazing. It is absolutely off the charts exciting because I know they want to be there. It's like they said that little prayer or little gratitude prayer beforehand too, just to make sure they were doing their best energy in that space too. Another thing I like to do when I'm working with my guests is that I use a scheduling system to be able to help them schedule the time that works best for them and in their time zone, and use the nudges in that to let that keep track of what time and how do we coordinate and where to meet and all of those things, because I really want it to be the best process, best experience for them. And when that is, it's going to come through in that interview. And that matters because they're doing something that's pretty scary. They're putting themselves out there and trusting that this is going to be a good space for them and for their business, as well as wanting to do a good job for the listeners of that show. So the more things I can do to help make them feel comfortable, I like that. I like being able to do that. I also ask them, what is there something you don't want me to talk about? And the reason I ask is because I want you to feel comfortable. I want that guest to truly feel comfortable, and asking a question that could potentially be off-putting is not going to do that. Now, there's always going to be something that could happen for sure. But if going in this area, this topic is really not okay for whatever reason, why would you ask it? To me, I'm not going to. So asking ahead of time is just essentially setting a boundary of saying, this is okay and this is not okay. I want to honor what's okay. Because again, that kind of goes back to that warm sunshine that I want to have on that person. And one of the things I also love to do is when I hear from a current guest or an upcoming guest that they really enjoyed a previous guest's episode and their specific why, like, I really enjoyed this episode with this person because of X, Y, or Z. I take that information, that X, Y, and Z, and I share it with the guest who was mentioned and tell them, thank you. One, I am so excited to know how much that interview touched the listener. The other is that lets that guest know you made a difference. You might not have realized that ripple effect, that what you contributed in the space with me and our conversation, how it helped or how it served or how it touched someone else in even this writing community. You might even get books sold in that way. But you know that you have had that ripple effect and it actually took place because you got some feedback that demonstrated that. What a joy it is to be able to send a little note that says, hey, I have to share this with you. I'm excited. Thank you for what you're doing. And thank you for being on the show. It's just such a joy to be able to do that. So I wanted to share with you a couple of really cool reviews that just made my day. And this was on the podcast. This is actually coming from iTunes. So please feel free to leave a review too. I would love that actually very much. But one was from M.R. Saperstein. And it says meaningful moments with Jen. It says, prior to being a guest on this podcast, I listened to many of the episodes. In each one, Jen has a wonderful way of having authors share their journeys so that those listening become inspired and learn more about the process of writing a book. I highly recommend this podcast to anyone interested in writing. Thank you. Thank you. And another was from Lainey Cameron. It says, great writing, inspiration, and insights. She continues by saying, Jennifer has an easy way with her guests. It's like listening in on a conversation between friends where writers share what they've overcome and what they've learned along the way. A must listen if you're starting your writing career or want to finish that book, or if you're several years in and just need a blast of inspiration. Well done. Thank you. Thank you both. I so appreciate hearing the kind words and the encouragement. It means a lot to me. And I just appreciate that so very much. So now if you're listening and you're wondering to yourself, you have more, you're getting that little nudge on the inside, and there's more that you can be doing to get your book out into the world, to get your voice into the world, to get your message, your work out into the world. And you need a little bit more of a boost to kind of help that out. I invite you to hone your pitching skills, hone your guesting skills, to take my course, Shine Like a Podcast Guest, Shine as a Podcast Guest. This course, it was created out of love, just like this show, because I really want you to feel like a rock star when you know the right shows to pitch, you know why you want to be on them, why they resonate or why they don't. So you can assess if it is truly the right fit for you and your brand. You hone a pitch, you show up as the amazing guest you are going to be. And then you actually have a great way of honoring that space after the interview is done, and a way to manage the interviews that you have been a part of to reuse that because it's content. That's what this course will do. And the best part about the course is that if you have any questions, even though it's self-paced, there's a space inside each lesson where if you have a question, just drop it in there for me and I will answer it for you, because I want you to be successful. I want you to get your word out, your voice out. And that whole new level, new devil, well, I want to make a bridge that makes it a bit easier for you to know that you can do it and you're not alone. And you are more than capable. Look what you've already done. Look what you're currently doing. You can do this. And I would love to see you. I would love to hear you on guesting it on a show. I think that would be so amazing. I think it is such a cool thing. So if this would help you, please sign up at jennifermilius.com, and I'll put a note in the show notes too. I'm really glad that you're here. And as I've said before, I know I've said it before, but I know it's important to repeat that I really believe that if you have that story in your heart to write, you are the right person to tell it. I believe that each one of us have our own strengths, our own gifts, our own personality, our own experiences that, yes, they might be similar to someone else, but they're not you. And you were given that story because you are the right vehicle. You are the right conduit, that right messenger to tell that story. Please, please tell your story, share your message, share your work. There are people who need to hear it, and they need to hear it from you. I know you have what it takes. I know that your work is needed. So until next time, keep working at this, keep showing up, keep believing in your work, keep taking the steps to make it happen. Even if that means you need to take a break, take the break and then show up again and keep going. Your message, your story, your book needs to get out there and find its people, with you confidently sharing it and confidently showing up and owning that space. You've got this, and I will see you soon. Thanks for being here.